And we are live. Hello, my lovelies. Today we are here with the most amazing Jeff Zentner to discuss his most amazing book, The Serpent King. And also we have my co-host here, Clint from Reads Readers, as well as a very special guest, Julie from Pages and Pens. We are so excited to be here with you, Jeff, and to be able to discuss this book and to ask you why.
Our hearts why.
I know that is a question a lot of people have reached out to me and been like, why? And I'm like, I
know. All right. So you guys want to know why I set the book in Tennessee. All right. Well, all right. So, no, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. So my process for creating characters has been the same for every one of my books. And I developed it during The Serpent King. And the reason I do this process is because I don't really know how to write a novel. I really have no idea what I'm doing. I know that sounds funny because I will have written and published 4 novels by August 10th of this year. But the way I accomplish that is through a sort of cheating. And the way that I cheat is I let someone else dictate the book to me. And that somebody else who I allow to dictate the book to me is my characters, right? Because I could never sit down across from you, Clint, or you, Melanie, or you, Julie. I could never sit across from any one of you 3 and say to you, all right, I'm going to tell you your story because I'm a storyteller. I'm going to tell you your story. So just listen up and I'm going to tell you who you are, where you've been, where you're going, who you love, loves you, what you desire, what you fear, all that stuff. I'm going to tell all that to you. Okay. So just sit down, keep your mouth shut. I could never do that ever. What I can do, however, and what I have done with all of my books is to say to you, tell me who you are, and I will listen and write down what you tell me. And by the way, if y'all can hear like street noise, I hope you can't. I am sitting in my truck in a Kroger parking lot because I was in a cabin in the woods, in the mountains, and I was not getting any internet access. So I'm down in a Kroger parking lot. So I apologize for any background noise you hear. Anyway, back to the topic. So I could not sit across from any real person and say to them, tell me who you are, but I can listen as they tell me who they are, and I can write that down, and that becomes then a story. And if I can do that with real people, I can do it with fictional people. It's really just a matter of knowing those fictional people well enough to hear their voices. And they tell me who they are, and they tell me their stories, and they tell me how they need to grow and learn and where their stories will end. And I write it down as they tell it to me. And that is truly what Travis told me about how his story would end. And I know that sounds like a cop-out, or I'm trying to escape blame for my terrible decisions, but that is truly what Travis told me about how his story would end. What he told me was that there was something there in the fact that not every life has to look the same for it to be a courageously lived life, right? I think Travis lived a good and courageous life. It was a short life. It was a life that was too short, but it was a good and courageous life. If you think about what he accomplished and what he had in his life before he died, he had good friends. He stood up to his father. He met his idol who encouraged him to write. He had started to write. He had a budding relationship in his life. He had some amazing, amazing things that some people live their whole lives without ever getting to have. So I think
chills.
I think Travis had a good life. I think he had a good life, and when he died, he had lived a good and full life, even though it was a short life.
Yeah, that you were talking, and it just gave me chills, like from my scalp down. I was just like, oh.
I knew. So I'll tell you all about when I knew that this was a story. When I knew that this might be a story that I publish. So are y'all familiar with the young adult author Stephanie Perkins, who wrote Anna and the French Kiss, Isla and the Happily Ever After. There's Someone Inside Your House. Okay, so I've been friends with Stephanie for years and years, long before either of us became writers, because we used to live in Asheville, North Carolina. And so I knew Stephanie there. And I was good friends with her husband, Jared. And Jared's a great reader. He's Stephanie's first reader, real sharp guy, good reader. And so when it came time for me to have somebody start putting eyes on my manuscript, Stephanie said, in addition to having me read it, you should have Jared read it. Jared's a great reader. And I said, yeah, sure, I'll have Jared read it. So I give the manuscript to Jared. He says, thanks. I go about my life. 3 weeks later, I get a text message from Jared that just simply says, F you. But he actually wrote out the word. And I was like, wait, what? What did I do? I text back, just a bunch of question marks. He goes, you know what you did, he texts back. I'm like, I don't know what I did. And he just simply texts back, Travis. And I was like, Travis? Travis from my book? And he says, yes. And I was like, oh, wow. He's like, you know what you did. That was the first time that I had any evidence that I could write something that would move people, that would make people feel emotion, that would make a buddy of mine feel enough emotion to text me a text and tell me to go F myself. So that was my first time I ever had to explain why. And I've had to do it many times since, and I'm happy to do it. But that was the first time ever. And that was the moment when I was like, this might be something that I can do. This might be something that is for me to do.
Go ahead, Julie.
Did it evoke the same emotion from you when you were writing it? Like,
absolutely.
Because it just, I'm pretty sure I can speak for all of us. I think it destroyed all of us. Like, my book is like wrinkled with tears. It's not fair.
100%, 100%. So when I was,
mine has black spots from my mascara running.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was writing this book, I was working a day job. I still have a day job. I was working a day job where I would ride the bus every day to and from work. And so I was writing the book on my phone with my thumb on the bus to and from work. So I was riding the bus home and I was typing this scene on my phone and I was just overcome. I was so overwhelmed by emotion. I actually had to pull the cord on the bus, get off the bus, sit in another actually Kroger parking lot. It's so funny, full circle. I had to sit in a Kroger parking lot until I could compose myself. I had 20 minutes before the next bus came. So I took that 20 minutes to try to like compose myself. And so I could get on the next bus and continue my commute home. Last year during the pandemic, well, we're still in the pandemic, but last year during last year's iteration of the pandemic, I read Goodbye Days and Serpent King out loud over Instagram Live. I did like a series and just every night I would read it live. And anybody who tuned in for that can attest to the fact that I had a really hard time getting through the Travis scene. Like I was just a wreck reading that scene. It was very embarrassing. I was on Instagram Live. I was like, see, you guys, I don't love it either. So there you go.
I can tell you, we've been doing a lot of live reading sprints throughout this readathon because it lasted the entire month. And I was in a live reading sprint when I read that part. So everybody got to see me. They made me full screen and everything. I was
zoomed in.
Yep, I was a mess. Everybody's like, "Oh, Melanie," huh? And then I was like,
but I will state in our defense, she had already started crying, so we thought she had already gotten to that part when we told her that she could continue on. No. And we didn't know she hadn't actually got to that part. So in our defense, she did that to herself a little bit by not telling us where she exactly was in the book.
I had just had happy tears the day before with the meeting, the idol thing, and I was like, I'm ending it there. Clint was trying to convince me to keep reading. I was like, no, I'm going to bed with happy thoughts, happy tears. And so the next day, I had my emotional cry, a small emotional cry over the scene that immediately follows that with the dad. And they thought that was, and I thought that was all it was going to be. And so they're all like, oh, it's okay. You're safe now to read. And I'm like, okay. And then immediately I was just like,
They just laid the trap for you.
I was like,
man.
I hate you guys.
I'm sorry.
Oh, she was texting us in our group chat.
Well, what I hope I gave you sweetness at the end to overcome the bitterness. I always tell people, I hope I will make it up to you by the end.
So this was your debut novel, correct?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
What inspired you to? Because I know that. Well, this was definitely not your field. So what inspired you to write this?
Yeah, so I was a musician for a lot of years, all through my 20s, and then I hit age 30. Okay, so my goal was to be a professional musician. That's what I really wanted to do. I moved to Nashville and did all that, and did the touring and recording and all that stuff. And I hit age 30 one night, and I was laying there in bed, and I suddenly had this epiphany, this realization that almost nobody makes it big in music after age 30, right? So you can be well past 30, you can be Adam Levine or whatever, and they're way past 30, but and still, making music and pop stars, but you got to get your start before age 30. You got to get in, you got to get your foot in the door. And I had not gotten my foot in the door. I had not had my big break, and I was 30. And so I realized that it probably was not going to happen for me. And so I was like, well, that sucks, because that was the dream for a long time. Like that's all I really wanted to do. So I was lost for a few years. And the way I coped with that was to go volunteer at a music camp for teenagers and teach teenagers how to play guitar. Because I was like, well, if I can't have this dream, if I can't realize this dream, well, maybe they can. Maybe I can pass the torch to somebody who can. And so I volunteer at this rock camp for teenagers called Tennessee Teen Rock Camp, and there was another one called Southern Girls Rock Camp. And I absolutely fell in love with young adults, and specifically with the way that young adults love the art that they love. There is something very, very special and beautiful and pure about the way young adults love the art that they love. They grab onto it like a life preserver, like they let it interweave itself with the fiber of their being, and it becomes part of their identity. It becomes part of the way they relate to the world. And to me, that is so incredible and beautiful. And the thought of making art for an audience that loved it that much was so appealing to me. But at that point that I was having this realization, I was like 36 years old. I was so far past the age that people make it big, making the kind of music gets marketed to young adults. I mean, if you look at who's making music that young adults are consuming, it's like Billie Eilish, it's like Megan Thee Stallion, it's like Post Malone, it's like all these people in their like late teens and 20s. So I was not going to make music for young adults. So I had to find something else to do if I wanted to make art for young adults. And I noticed that there was this big category in publishing called young adult. And I was like, hey, I bet young adults read young adult books. I'll bet that's something I could do. And two, publishing is a lot more forgiving of age, right? It's the opposite of music, where if you get a book published before you're 30, that's pretty extraordinary. Like, you're doing pretty great. So I was like, I still have time to get into publishing. Maybe all that artistic energy that I used to pour into music, all that part of my soul, all that part of my heart, maybe I could pour that into writing books for young adults, and maybe I could end up creating art for young adults. And so that's how that happened. And I'll tell you what, I got exactly what I wanted, because young adults And the people who are still young at heart and read young adult books, us adults who read young adult books, wear their hearts on their sleeves. And so it's so gratifying to hear from readers who allow books to move them, who allow books to touch them and to affect them emotionally. It's so gratifying. And it's such a great audience to make art for. So that's how I ended up writing The Serpent King. And I started looking at my songwriting catalog, trying to figure out inspiration for a novel, right? Because I had all these perfectly good ideas that weren't going to go to use anymore. So I was like, maybe I can expand out one of these ideas into novel length. So I settled on a couple of songs that I thought had more of a story to them than I had told in the original 3 or 4 minutes of the song, and put those ideas together. And that's what eventually became The Serpent King.
I love that.
Yeah.
I have a quick question then. Speaking of kind of like passing the torch and leading the next generation, was there an author inspiration for you and when you were writing Travis and his interaction with his idol, his author, and where that came from?
Oh yeah, for sure. So obviously he's heavily based on George R.R. Martin, author of Game of Thrones series. And here's what's so funny. Long after The Serpent King had been published, like 2 years after The Serpent King had been published, Game of Thrones was coming to an end, the TV series. And so this story about George R.R. Martin went viral, where this guy was at the theater. He was like at a Broadway show. And he was at a Broadway show with his friend who had cancer, like his friend was dying. And so his friend was a huge George R.R. Martin fan. And this guy saw George R.R. Martin at the theater. And he was like, oh my gosh, I got to go talk to him for my buddy. So he goes up to George R.R. Martin. He's like, hey, could you just come say hi to my buddy? My buddy has cancer. He's dying. Like, it would mean the world to him. And not only did George R.R. Martin do that, he invited the buddy with cancer out for pizza with him after. So he like fully got to hang out with him. But I had not heard, nobody really had heard that story until years after The Serpent King published. So I feel like when I based that character on George R.R. Martin, I just absolutely nailed it without even realizing it. I feel pretty patting myself on the back there. But so it's based on him. It's based a little bit on the YA author John Corey Whaley, who was one of my very first author friends. He befriended me before there was any reason to befriend me. I was nobody. I had not published anything. He had never read anything I'd written. He just became my friend. He became my buddy. I loved his books. We just kind of started talking, became buddies. We're still great buddies. But so I kind of based it on him too. So that's kind of who GM Pennington is based on.
There's a lot of books mentioned throughout this book, and some of them I was like, okay, I know this book, and others I looked up because I love bookish books. If it's like bookish characters or anything like that. And when Bloodfall was mentioned, I was looking and I was like, all the other books are real. I was like, but Bloodfall's not real. or can I just not find it? And I was asking Clint about it, and he's like, no, I looked it up too. And we're like, Jeff needs to write Bloodfall.
Y'all think that, but I promise you you don't want me writing a fantasy novel. It would not be any good. I wrote as much of Bloodfall filtered through Travis's imagination as you ever really want to see. I will say this. If you have read Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee, Bloodfall has a little cameo in that. And also Bloodfall has a little cameo in my new book, In the Wild Light, that comes out on August 10th. So little Easter eggs, little mentions, just to remind you that Bloodfall exists in the world of Jeff Zentner books and nowhere else.
That's awesome. I actually have Rain and Delilah, but haven't read it yet. But I'm going to be looking for that when I do read it. That's
there
exciting.
There you go.
Are there any other hidden cameos that we can look for in the new book? Because I know you tend to like get music in there, or there's little cameos that pop up in the other books.
For sure. There's a really fun Lydia cameo in The Wild Light. Lydia has not had a cameo yet. So Dill has had cameos in Goodbye Days and Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee. And he does have a tiny, tiny little cameo in The Wild Light. But in The Wild Light is where Lydia gets to have a really fun cameo. And I get so excited when I'm writing a scene and I suddenly realize that it would be the perfect scene to have a cameo. And so I had written this scene out and I was like, Lydia could do this. This is Lydia's scene. So I rewrote it with Lydia. Also, if you've read Goodbye Days, Nana Betsy from Goodbye Days has a very important role in the new book. It's a small role. She doesn't have a lot of screen time, but it's a very pivotal role. And I think you'll enjoy what you get to see of her in The Wild Light.
Great.
So before reading this book, I had no idea that the snake handling thing, that was a real thing. I did not know that there was this religion or whatever that literally handles snakes.
Which is so funny because the area around you is like one of the hotbeds in America it's like one of the only places where it goes on.
I actually talked to my mom and we were talking about it and she's like, yeah. And I was like, I had no idea. Like,
as a matter of fact,
I ended up in a church like that, I'd be like, oh, I meant to go to the movie. Sorry.
As a matter of fact, I almost set the book right outside of Chattanooga, like in a small town near Chattanooga, because of that. But ultimately, I decided to set it in a fictional version of Sparta, Tennessee, just because it was an hour and a half from any big city, which makes it inconvenient to get to a big city. I didn't want to set it like a half hour from Chattanooga because then it's like, well, you can just go to Chattanooga, and Chattanooga is like a big, nice city. So that's why I didn't ultimately end up setting it near Chattanooga.
Yeah, I totally was researching, trying to figure out exactly what city you use, because I was like, all right, they went 30 minutes to Cookeville, and I can't remember how long it took to get to Nashville. So it's somewhere around here. And then I saw that the bookstore that you mentioned in here is a bookstore in Sparta, Tennessee.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, the last time I went in that bookstore, it was a couple years ago. But the last time I went in that real bookstore, some kid came in and started, and I'm not joking, some kid came in and started talking with the owner of the bookstore about Game of Thrones. I am not joking at all. I was dying. I was like freaking out. It was so much fun.
Oh my goodness. Did you tell him he needs to read this?
No, I kept my mouth shut. I kept quiet and I just accepted that gift from God silently, and I was like, "This is so cool."
So, is the owner of that bookstore? Is he the kindly old man that you mentioned in here?
No, it's a lady. It's a lady, I think in her 40s probably, and just like a mom. She's like, "Yeah, I open the store when I don't need to do vacuuming at home or get the kids off to school." Or yeah, no, I really invented the bookstore owner.
Let's see, Kay says, I attended a Pentecostal church in Northern Ontario growing up, and there was no talking in tongues and snake wrestling in my church.
Oh yeah, no, it's very much a Southern United States thing. I don't think it happens anywhere else, really.
Yeah.
I have been to a church where they did the speaking in tongues, but it was not, they didn't have snakes. I would have been up the wall or out, just ran out the building. Or
I've actually been to a church where they had the snakes out. A friend of mine was trying out different churches to find one that fit for him, and we walked into this church. The minute I saw the snakes and someone was praying to it, I went, "Nope, I'll be in the car. You have fun. I'll be in the car. I will be in the car. Sorry, I'm out.
The Serpent King was made into a movie.
Ooh.
Oh, I would love that. I love book to movie adaptations, and I think they could do a really nice job with the Serpent King. It had been optioned for somebody to make it into a movie, but the option expired, and so now I don't know what'll end up happening with that, if it'll get made into a movie or what. But it'd be nice. I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be cool.
Okay. I have a question regarding Lydia's, not so much Lydia's cameo, but Lydia's role in the Serpent King.
Yeah.
So how pivotal do you think it was for Lydia to be such a drastic like difference from Dill and from Travis and her life and her relationship with her parents and her socioeconomic status? Like it was such a stark difference to the men and the boys in the book, which made her at sometimes like incredibly unlikable because she like there was moments where she didn't get it and then moments where they were trying to make her see things. But it was a like how vital was she, and was she always like that as you were drafting?
Well, she was vital, and yeah, it was always like that because every book I want to say things about things. I want to say things about the world, right? I have an opportunity to talk to young adults. So I have an opportunity to talk about the things that concern me, to talk about the things that I want young adults to think about, right? It's a different audience to write for than if you're writing for adults, right? You have an opportunity to teach. You have an opportunity to talk about what a better world could look like, right? And so one thing that particularly concerns me is the growing economic divide in America between the haves and the have-nots, right? You've got people who can barely pay the bills. They're underwater with medical bills. They're getting evicted from their homes. Meanwhile, you've got a dude shooting himself into space. He's got so much money, he doesn't know what to do with it, so he's shooting himself up into space. To me, a society cannot survive very long with that kind of disparity between people. And so I wanted to talk about that divide and use characters to embody that divide. I wanted to talk about the privilege that comes from occupying an elevated economic class. Like, even if you're not popular in school, like Lydia wasn't popular, even if you're not popular, you have access to opportunities that your friends don't have. You have access to a family situation that your folks don't have. And it's not Lydia's fault. She's never known anything different. That's how she was raised. But she still had to have that wake up call and understand the ways that her life was very, very different from her friends.
So Kelly has a question. She says she adores this book, and she wants to know, which character do you see yourself in the most?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you, Kelly. And thank you to all of y'all who have said such lovely things in the chat. I keep seeing those chat messages, and it's making my day. I never write characters that are terribly autobiographical. And the reason being is I want my characters to be able to be cooler than me and more awesome. So there's a lot of me in all my characters. There's a good dose of me in Lydia, right? Because I never got the experience of living life as a teenage girl. So I got to live a little bit of another life through her. So I put some of my qualities into Lydia. Travis, there's definitely a big part of me in Travis. There's a big part of me in Dill. If I were really pressed to say who is the most like me in the Serpent King, I'd say Dill is 31% me, where Lydia's 30% me and Travis is 30% me. I guess that math doesn't work out. Well, I guess they don't have to add up to 100%. Never mind. Okay. Yeah. So sorry. I didn't want you all seeing me doing math live on air. Yeah. Never mind. It did not have to add up to 100%. Each one is 100% in themselves. Each has 30. Okay. Sorry. Yep. Continue.
Let's see. Tori says, if I wasn't crying in this book, Travis's dad was really pissing me off, and I just wanted to shoot him. So I was either happy, sad, or pissed off. Love books that bring out emotions.
Yeah, someone is named Clint.
Oh, sorry
that
about that.
Character pissed me off. I don't know how much. I just wanted to set him aflame.
Oh, sorry. You're good, Clint. You've redeemed the name of Clint for me. I'll need to write a good Clint into a book. Yeah, he was an awful guy. But I feel like there's a lot of dudes like him, and I feel like that number is only growing. I feel like I wrote that character before, like, Trump or anything like that. Like, and I feel like it's that kind of character is like really, really growing. Like that character to me, again, talking about things that I want to talk about in my books. I wanted to talk about toxic masculinity, and specifically the breed of toxic masculinity you get in the South. And so Clint Bohannon was how I wanted to talk about that. But I didn't want to make Clint Bohannon just like pure evil. Like I included in there the reasons why Clint Bohannon was who he was, right? His life had not turned out the way he thought it would. He was a high school football star, and then his life kind of just didn't go anywhere. Like he's got like this failing lumberyard business. He's lost a son who he really loved and was really proud of, and he drinks too much, and he's got a hard life. And that's not to excuse him, but it is to say that he might not have been born evil. He might have had circumstances that he gave into and allowed to shape him and make himself the worst version of himself.
Tori kind of rephrased her thing here, but she wanted to thank you for bringing out the different emotions in your readers.
I really, well, and thank you for that. I really do try in all my books to make my readers at one point laugh out loud and cry. That is what I try to do, because that's what I love when books make me do. So Serpent King and Goodbye Days, a little more crying than laughing, but I try to have the laughter in there. Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee, I decided to flip the script a little bit and flip it back to, what if I tried to make readers laugh more than they cried? And so that was what Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee is. That is my comedy. And I don't know if it'll make you laugh, but it made me laugh writing it. I enjoyed it, writing those characters. It made me laugh writing it. So I hope it'll make you laugh if you read it. And then there's some crying, I think, in Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee, but it's very different from Goodbye Days and Serpent King.
During that live show, when we're in the reading sprints, we're muted and we're just, reading. And my husband, he's in the room next to me, and he kept going, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" And he told me later, he's like, "I don't know that I like you reading this book." And I was like, "Why?" And he's like, "Because it makes you so sad, and it makes me sad." He hasn't even read it, and it made him sad.
I'm ruining married couples nights here.
No, I loved it. So I was like, it's okay, but it's his book.
I think one of the things that made me laugh the most was when they're going up the water tower and they're like, "We got to bring the butter next time." But what I was wondering was, is there like an actual real water tower, and has anybody gone up on one of these and left your quotes on a water tower and sent you pictures? Because I want that in my life. I don't know about you, but like, I want that for you.
I would love that. I've had some readers get tattoos of quotes from the book. I haven't had anybody graffiti yet that I know of, but that particular aspect of the book is very much based on real life. When I was in high school, me and my high school girlfriend would sneak out onto the railroad bridge in our town over the river, and we would sneak up onto the catwalks, and you could go out over the catwalks and then go down onto a column in the river. And we would do that. We would write poetry on the column. She was a poet, so she'd write her own poetry, and I didn't think of myself as a writer then, and so I would just write poems that I knew and loved, and so I'd write those down. But yeah, so we would actually do that. And the last time we tried to go, they had blocked it off, so you couldn't get there anymore. So for all I know, that poetry is still preserved there if they haven't repainted over it.
Well, I'm putting it out in the universe. We need some like water tower Jeff Zentner quotes out there.
I'll take it, man. If you go graffiti something with one of my quotes, take a picture of me. I'll be really proud.
That'll also be evidence. Okay, so where did you come up with the name Dill? Because I mean, it sounds like a pickle. So I was wondering where that name came from.
Or Dillard.
Yeah. So, and what's funny is I had not read To Kill a Mockingbird at the time that I wrote The Serpent King. And so I didn't realize there was a character named Dill in To Kill a Mockingbird. I probably would have named Dill something different because it looks awfully presumptuous of me to just steal a name from To Kill a Mockingbird. But what I needed for Dill was a name that sounded odd and plausibly generational, right? So I needed a name that sounded like it could be the name of a grandpa in the South, a father, and then a son. And I started looking around for good names, and I had a CD of this old Appalachian ballad singer named Dillard Chandler. And that name just stuck in my head, Dillard. That is a name that you don't hear very often. It's obviously a name that an old Southern man could have, because this old Appalachian singer, he's like in his 80s when this CD was recorded, has that name. So I just stole it right off that. And then from there, just shortened it to Dill. So it's, yeah, that's kind of how that came about.
Okay.
Dillard Wayne Early. And Early comes from, I used to work with a lady named Patience Early, which I thought was the coolest name I had ever heard. It sounds like the name of a lady gunslinger in the West. Patience
Yes.
Early and her 6 guns. And so I swore if I ever wrote a book, this was long before I had ever thought of writing a book, but I swore to myself, if I ever wrote a book, I was going to have a character in there with the last name Early, because I thought that was such a cool name, Patience Early.
That is a cool name. I like that.
That is. Going back to Lydia and the disposition of Lydia with Dolly Parton, because the fact that Dolly Parton grew up kind of like Travis and Dill did,
Yep.
and became somebody. Was it intentional for you to use someone like Dolly to be the opposite of Lydia, and Lydia not to see the opposite there? Like, she used someone that was such a great inspiration for her to be like just like her best friends, even though it's like a different life than what she lives.
Okay, so that's the first time anybody has ever noticed that and pointed that out, including me. And now I'm really mad that I did not explicitly address that in the book. Now I am so sad that and want to go back and edit the Serpent King to deal with that, because that would be so cool if I had actually realized that. I did not realize that. I just had Dolly Parton because, I mean, come on, like, it's Dolly Parton, right? Like,
Yeah.
if I just put mentions of Dolly Parton in the book, like, automatically it makes the book 20% better, right? So, yeah,
Yes.
I just thought it would be great for Lydia to be obsessed with Dolly Parton. To me, that seemed like something that a very cool teenage girl would be into, is Dolly Parton.
Good catch.
And I mean, Dolly,
I'm
Tennessee.
obsessed with Dolly, so it's like I noticed those little few things that Dolly had, like connections with how like Travis's family and how Dill's family was, with the way she grew up and the differences that she brought out into it. I just thought it was kind of cool that Lydia, the one that doesn't fully understand it, would worship someone who lived that.
Totally.
I just thought that was kind of cool.
No, you're absolutely right. I wish I had noticed that. That's honestly the first time anybody's ever caught that. That's really cool. You ever been to Dollywood?
No, but I really want to. Like, I really want to.
Yeah, you got to. Oh, it is so much fun. It, in my opinion, is more fun than Disneyland. It is amazing. The food is all amazing. Like, it's like genuinely amazing food at the park. There's so much Dolly stuff. Like, it is a theme park that is run the way you would hope that a Dolly Parton theme park would be run. Everything just works. Everything is well run. Everything is fun and sweet, and you would have the time of your life. You've got to go to Dollywood.
The lines aren't nearly as bad as Disney either.
No, absolutely not.
Note to self: honeymoon. Gotcha.
There you go.
So tell us a little bit about your upcoming book.
Okay, all right. So In the Wild Light comes out in 10 days? It's August 10th, 10 days from now, probably. Again, doing math on camera is bad for me. It is about 2 kids from rural East Tennessee, the Appalachian part of Tennessee, Once more, I created a fictional town, like I did with Forestville in the Serpent King, of Sawyer, Tennessee, because I wanted to base the book originally in Newport, Tennessee, but I needed to throw the school system under the bus a little bit. And I didn't want to do that to Newport, Tennessee, because I'm sure there are wonderful teachers, administrators working in the Newport school system. So I needed to, like in Serpent King, where I had to throw Forestville under the bus a little bit. I didn't want to do that to Sparta. Sparta's a nice place. So I had to invent a town. So these two teenagers are from Sawyer, Tennessee. One of them, named Delaney Doyle, is a genius. She has a photographic memory. Her mind just works in that mysterious way of geniuses. And she and her best buddy, Cash Pruitt, are big into hiking and canoeing. And so Cash learned all that from his papa. And he takes her out on the river, and they go explore caves along the river. And so they explore a cave, and Delaney takes a sample of mold from the wall of this cave and goes and runs tests on it in her high school lab and discovers that it's this powerful antibiotic. It kills all antibiotic resistant bacteria. So she gets it in the hands of a Vanderbilt scientist. They publish. It's kind of a sensation because this revolutionizes the fight against antibiotic resistant bacteria. So suddenly Delaney is this minor celebrity. And this woman who graduated from this elite Northeastern prep school hears about Delaney and offers to pay for Delaney to go to this school that was her alma mater. And Delaney says, okay, I'll go, but you got to give my best friend a scholarship too. That's Cash. And so the school is like, okay, yeah, we can do that. So then Cash has to decide whether he wants to go to the school, but it's a tough decision because his grandfather, who raised him, his papa, is dying of emphysema. And his mother, Cash's mother, died of an opioid overdose. So Cash is really afraid to leave his grandpa because he thinks he's going to die while he's gone at school. So it's a really tough decision for him. So, spoiler alert, he ends up going to the school. And he's really lost. He's homesick. In many ways, this book is a spiritual sequel to The Serpent King without being a sequel to The Serpent King, in that I answer the question, what if Dill and Lydia both got out of Forestville in the same place? What if they went to school together? What would that look like? And so I try to answer that question in The Wild Light. So Cash goes to this school. He ends up taking a poetry class because he needs an English credit. And his poetry teacher is also Appalachian and recognizes a poetic spirit in Cash, and she works to foster that spirit. So Cash kind of develops this love for poetry. He copes with homesickness. He copes with trauma. He copes with pain. So anyway, that's kind of what it's about. People who have read it seem to be liking it. So far it's done better in reviews than The Serpent King did. So if you like The Serpent King, I think there's probably a good chance you'll like In the Wild Light.
But be prepared to cry again, right?
Be prepared to cry again. Yep, we're back to mostly crying and some laughter. There you go. There you go, Clint. I love it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is this one going to rip our hearts out? And yep.
Yep. It's one of those. I got my comedy out of my system with Rain and Delilah. Now I'm ready to be sad again.
Oof.
But it's hopeful. All my books, I'll never write a book with a hopeless ending. I'll never write a book that makes you feel sad by the ending. And I think In the Wild Light has a very, very triumphant ending. So I'm going to make you sad, but I'm also going to give you a lot of sweetness.
I love when a book can, make you feel so many things and make you feel so connected to these people that you actually feel these things. So that, it's not just like, oh, that's so sad. It was like literally heartbreaking. Like that was your own friend or whatever.
Right.
I had somebody write me shortly before the live show and commenting about, hold on, let me pull it up here. Commenting about the book. She said, I finished The Serpent King yesterday and cried for 2.5 hours. I'm like, I feel you.
Yes.
I did it live. I feel you.
I think I did I had like a series on my channel with Throwback Thursday where I reread old favorites and vlogged it, and I did The Serpent King for one of them, and it was just a mess. It was ugly, but it was a beautiful ugly, and I was fine with it. I leaned into it. So
Oh, that's great.
I will state that's the one thing I love about this book is how realistic it feels. It's like you know these characters in and out. By like the third chapter, you're already fascinated with them and you're already immersed in their world. And the fact that the first time that I read this, we got to the Travis scene, I literally sat down the book, cried for 5 hours, came back to the book because I'm like, I just want to end it. I just want to finish it. I just want to finish it. I just need to finish it because I don't know if I can handle anymore. Got to the end and cried for 3 more hours. And I was like, okay, cool. Best book ever. Okay, cool. We're good. I was like, we're good. I'll wait a few months before I reread it.
Well,
yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say thank you for that. Like, to me, that's the greatest compliment, the compliment on the realism of the book. It's so important to me to make a book feel realistic. I will tell you that I was working as a prosecutor for the state of Tennessee at the time that I wrote The Serpent King. So I was handling a lot of cases. And Travis's demise was based on a case that I had, a case I actually had. And his 911 call, Travis's 911 call is almost verbatim a 911 call that I actually listened to, like a real 911 call. So truly, like I made that book as realistic as I possibly could.
That was a very scary, realistic kind of scene because, and Clint knows about this, back in around the end of March, beginning of April, my son, who is 15, him and his friend, they got carjacked and robbed at gunpoint.
Oh,
yeah. And his phone was stolen and all of that stuff. And it was hours after he was supposed to be home before I ever heard from him. And luckily he found somebody he was able to borrow a phone from.
Oh, that's terrifying.
I was a mess. And so while I was reading that, I was not reading Travis. I was reading my son.
Yeah. Oh.
And so that was so like, oh, when I was reading, because that was exactly what I was seeing was but luckily for me, my son was fine.
Oh,
and good. His friend was fine. They just lost the car and phones and money and things like that, but they weren't hurt. And
I'm so glad the universe wrote that story instead of me, right?
Right. Yeah. Luckily he was able, they were walking until they found some random person that was working on their car at 11:30 at night.
Oh my gosh.
And that person let them use the phone and called me, and I went to them and got the police and all of that. But yeah, they were fine. But that was terrifying all around. It was terrifying for them. It was terrifying for me not knowing what was going on. And then for him to tell me the story about he literally had 3 guns from these 3 different people sticking in his stomach.
Oh my gosh.
There's a car sound. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in one of those towns where people like peel out to impress the ladies. So hope you all are not too impressed to focus now.
But yeah, that was when I was reading that was what I was seeing, and so it was just like that hit very close to home.
Oh man. Well, I'm glad everything turned out all right there.
Yeah. Oh. I have a question from like an author standpoint. I know that I came across The Serpent King in an Outcrate box, and I'm so grateful that they included that book in that box because I don't know how I would have found you or if I would have found you otherwise, but I'm very grateful for that. In terms of supporting In the Wild Light, do you have offers or is there, I know COVID and the pandemic has changed a lot of things, but are there signed book options? Is there like a great place or a bookstore that you like supporting?
Yeah. So if you order In the Wild Light from either Parnassus Books in Nashville or Reading Rock Books in Dixon, Tennessee, if you order from either one of those, you can get it signed and personalized. So I'll be signing all those. They can ship. Obviously it's a little more expensive than Amazon, but if you order from Amazon, you won't get a signed personalized copy. So yeah, if you ordered from those places, that would be really wonderful. I'd be so appreciative.
Awesome.
And it helps out some really great bookstores too. It helps out some really great bookstores.
So are you currently working on anything new?
Yes, I am. I am working on a collaboration with another YA author who you've almost certainly heard of, on a verse novel. So we are doing a verse novel, and I'm really excited about it. It's actually a novel. We call it a novel in verse and conversation because there's poems and there's dialogue, but that's it. It's poems and dialogue. And I'm having an absolute blast writing it. I'm really excited. So that's what I'm working on now. It's coming along slowly but surely because she's needing to finish a book and then she can dive back into this project. But hopefully you'll see that soon.
Are you able to tell us who the other author is?
I better not yet. I don't think I can tell yet, but I'm excited about it. And when you find out, I think you will be too.
Okay, another question that we always ask during these is, do you have a book that you would recommend any of us that you would think that we have to read if we're going to read something outside of your works, obviously, but like any books that you've read recently that you think we just need to read that everybody needs more hype on?
Yeah, so there are some YA books that I really love that I would love to see get more eyes on them. The First Time She Drowned by Carrie Kletter is just a gorgeous lyrical book. It's my favorite YA book. I love it so much. It is phenomenal. The First Time She Drowned. Hello Girls by Brittany Cavallaro and Emily Henry is phenomenal. It's so funny and sharp and snarky and hilarious. That one is a good one to read with Rain and Delilah's Midnight Matinee. They're very much like of a piece. Picture Us in the Light by Kelly Loy Gilbert is phenomenal. The Carnival at Bray by Jessie Ann Foley is phenomenal. So those are some of the books that I would love to see read more because I think they are highly underrated. They're amazing.
Well, thank you. Are you reading anything right now?
What am I reading now? I am reading a book, an adult book called 1004 by Ben Lerner. I just started that this morning. I'm really, really excited for some books that are coming out in September. One of my favorite authors, Richard Powers, who lives in Tennessee now, is coming out with a book called Bewilderment that I'm really excited about. Sally Rooney, who wrote Normal People, is coming out with a new book. I'm really excited about that. Anthony Doerr, who wrote All the Light We Cannot See, is coming out with a new book. So I'm really excited for what's going to happen in September. I'm very stoked for next month.
Do you have any plans to attend any bookish events coming up? Like, for example, Y'all Fest in November.
So I'm not going to Y'all Fest, but my launch at Parnassus is going to be in person. You got to register, and the spots are limited. It may be full already. I'm going to be doing Yahoo Fest again, although I think it's going to be a virtual conference this year again. I am doing some other stuff, not tons and tons of events. I think people are still kind of waiting to see what happens with the pandemic.
Okay. How about some fun questions? Do you have like a go-to thing that you always have with you when you're writing? This has been a fun question to ask people because I've heard some interesting items that are like, what was it that Janella had?
Oh, it was a what was it, a brooch or a pin of like this little red cardinal that always sits on her desk.
Yeah, she would keep it clipped to her computer screen.
Yeah.
And she would just pet her little bird.
So I used to do all my writing on the bus, right? All my 4 books have been written on the bus. Now I work from home, and so now I got to answer this question differently. I always have to have a scented candle going when I'm writing, or incense, or sometimes both. I love lots of good smell. I love smells. I think that we feed our ears with music. We feed our eyes with artwork, with painting, with dance, with television shows, with photography. We feed our mouths and our stomachs with food and drink, but we don't often go out of our way to feed our noses, feed our sense of smell. So I love to feed my sense of smell. I love to feed my nose with wonderful smells. So I always have to have a scented candle or incense going while I write.
What is your go-to scent? Do you like the desserty kind of smells or the fruity smells or
boy,
cologne ones?
I'm a big fan of smoky smells. I love candles and incense that remind me of the smell of wood smoke, campfires, and that sort of thing. I love just like a good cheap pumpkin spice candle in autumn. I love a cheap pumpkin spice candle. I love a good like tobacco and leather candle that smells like an old library. But yeah, I have a wide range of smells that I love.
Go ahead, Julie.
As a musical person, I know that there had been somebody that created a playlist for the Serpent King that you had endorsed and then shared that was like amazing. But are you a writer who writes to music, and do you have like a playlist for your books and for your characters?
So I don't listen to music while I'm actually doing the writing, but I think to music and I get inspiration to music. So every night I'll go on a walk and I'll listen to music, and that's where my inspiration percolates. That's where I think of ideas, stories, character directions, character arcs, things like that. And so In the Wild Light has a playlist. I need to like build it out on Spotify so I can share it, but I'm going to do that.
Awesome.
I love that you're like, you take these songs, whether they're your songs or whatever, and you use that as like the basis for this is your book. And I think that's really cool to turn it into that.
Had to recycle.
Do you have a go-to snack that you munch on while you're eating?
So I am in love with Trader Joe's. Has these dried mandarin oranges that are like dried on the outside, but like still juicy on the inside. They are amazing. I've never seen them anywhere but Trader Joe's. So I love those. I also love chocolate chips because you can just kind of like eat them and you feel like you're eating a lot of chocolate, but you're not really, because they're just little chocolate chips. So I love eating chocolate chips. And I get big bags of chocolate chips from Costco, like the big Kirkland brand. I'll get myself a little dish of chocolate chips and I'll just pop chocolate chips while I'm writing.
I can't remember who it was, but there was another author that does the little bowl, but he does M&Ms. He's like, I'm afraid I'll eat too many of them. So he just puts a little bowl and that's all he'll allow himself.
Same idea, exactly same concept.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us here today. If anybody else has any questions or comments, please ask away and we will put them on the screen here for Jeff. Clint, Julie, do either of you have any more questions for Jeff?
I think that was everything.
Yeah, I think you asked a lot of the ones that popped in my head. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The main one I had was why? My heart.
That was the main one a lot of people had. Was why?
That's most of our live shows, our live reading sprints lately, is everyone's going, why my heart?
This book was amazing. I don't think I've ever cried so much with a book. I have cried with many books, but I don't think I've ever cried this much over and over and over again.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all so much. This was really, really wonderful. Your questions were great, and I had an absolute blast. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we appreciate you taking the time to sit in a Kroger parking lot to talk with us.
You bet. Y'all have a wonderful day.
You
Thank
too.
you.
You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
And for those that are interested in hanging out more with Clint and I, we are going to be doing our after-hour show at 8 p.m. tonight. So come back and join us. And Julie, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. This is one of my all-time favorite books, so there was no way I could pass up the opportunity to sit down and discuss it some more. I'm always excited to talk about this one forever.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those books that's going to stick in my brain for a very, very long time. I don't know that this is a book I'll ever forget. Like there have been multiple times throughout this live show that I'm having to like suck it in.
Yeah. And I will tell you that there is no amount of rereads that makes it less like tragic or impactful.
No.
Like it is just as hard hitting each time you read it. But I will encourage everybody to try to like push through and reread it, because there's so many layers and so much like beauty to the writing that like every time I read it, I get something a little bit different.
I
This is
also
the first of his that I've read. So
I've also have suggested to a couple of other people who have read it or who I've gotten to read it to go into it slightly blind. Like read a little bit of the synopsis. Yes, the synopsis may not sound like something that you would actually ever read. Like there's religion in this book. I normally won't pick up books with religion, especially growing up in Oklahoma in the South, really hardcore Southern Baptist, and being queer, and religion and me just don't mix. So it's like, I was like, nope. I like, once you told me in a video, you told someone in a video to just read it going into it blind. I immediately ordered it, read it, and was like, okay, now I see why you go into this blind.
Yeah.
Oh
and
my
I
God,
think
my
for
heart.
those same reasons, I don't think the blurb would have been something that naturally grabbed me, but because I did get it in an Owl Crate box, I was like, oh, you know, I'll give it a read. And it had just come out. So there was no reviews. Like I hadn't seen anything, heard anything. I had no expectations going in other than like, oh, this is not quite like my normal read. So glad that I pushed through and read it.
So outside the comfort zone, but so worth it.
Yeah.
For me, I randomly came across this book at Ollie's, which is like this discount kind of store. I bought this for $1.99 and got 15% off because I had a coupon. And I was just like, okay, I'll give it a try. And then it sat on my shelf for who knows how long until Clint was like, read it.
When we were looking at,
look at all that. It's
listen, I started to as well.
So ridiculously tabbed and like underlined and like I've got annotations and just all the tears and all the love for this one.
I don't tab that many books up, and the fact that I have at least 3 in this one says something.
Yeah.
It's just like recently that I started tabbing books, and I was just like, I have to remember that quote. I have to remember that quote. I've got to remember that scene. Ugh.
Rereading it in the future, I'll tab it. Normally, I don't do a lot of tabbing unless it's just I've got to write something down right then. Normally, I just want to be in the book and just enjoying the book. And so if it's something that I think is tab worthy, I'll go back and reread it and tab it when I'm rereading it. And so this was one that I was just reading, and I went through it pretty quickly. And this is definitely a tab worthy book.
Yeah.
But it'll be a long time probably before I reread it because my heart.
I don't blame you. The first time I read it, I definitely was not annotating yet. It was like early in my booktube, and I was like, oh no, I could never. And then upon rereads, I went like I went in on it. But yeah.
Kay says she picked up it because of you.
Yay.
I mean, you were pushing it so hard there for a moment, and I was just like, just kept looking at it thinking, oh, that's got to be a fantasy. So I'm like, I'll pick it up. Julie loves it. It looks like a fantasy. I'll pick it up, whatever. Halfway like through like the first chapter, I'm like, this isn't a fantasy. Like this is like, okay, it's got religion. Okay, cool. Let's just read it. Julie loves it. I'll trust it. And then I'm just like, oh, my heart. Oh God. Oh God, this is so good.
I did a channel survey a little while ago, and it was, I think, that and the Wicked Deep that I was like most known for, that everybody said like
I got the Wicked Deep because of you.
Same. I have it. I have
copies of the Wicked Deep.
Yeah. I have it over there.
Read it, but I have it because of you.
Oh, I read it the minute it came in because Julie was like, this is amazing. You have to read it. So I pre-ordered it. And I was just like, okay, cool, let's go.
Let's do it.
I ended up getting, my husband bought it for me because it was on my wish list as part of he did a Merry Bookmas Advent thing for me one year. And then I also opened up a subscription box that had it in it, and it had the different color. I think it was an Owl Crate, probably.
The Owl Crate one, yeah.
And I was like, ooh, I like this cover better. Sorry, Marty, I'm gonna unhaul the one you got me.
Was that one an Owl Crate, or was it Winterwood in Owl Crate?
That was Winterwood. That was
Winterwood was Owl Crate.
I was like, wait, no, Winterwood was Owl Crate because that's the one that's white and blue.
Correct.
Oh, maybe that's the one that
as good as Wicked Deep, but that one was okay.
It's black though.
I did just finish the Arco for Adult one though, which is different.
Did you see that she's coming out with a Disney retelling for Nightmare Before Christmas? The continuation of the movie?
Yeah, from Sally's story.
Yes. And I'm like, I need in my life, I'm like, it's Shea Earnshaw, so I could go one or the other way, go one extreme or the other extreme, but I'm like, I still need this.
Yeah.
Tori's asking, so I don't know if I missed it earlier, but where did you come up with the name for the buck?
I think the book, The Serpent King. I think it was a question for Jeff.
Oh.
I'm assuming it's something based on Dill and his family and his father and like.
Well, the grandfather was known as the Serpent King.
And then that was one question we forgot to ask. Like, I wasn't even thinking about the title of the book. I'm just like, it's more the content.
Well, but I think it was pretty well explained within the book too, kind of like what that legacy was for him and his family, and him trying to escape that legacy of, what they kind of left him.
Kelly says she literally read it for the readathon, and so glad she did. Oh my goodness. We have had some of the most amazing books for our group reads for the SeasonAthon readathons, and have been so fortunate to have these amazing authors join us. Oh my goodness. We've had Jessica Brody, Kristen Simmons,
Emily Werbely and Austin Sigma Broca, Caleb Roehrig, Janella, Crystal Sutherland, Adriana Mather. I feel like we're missing someone. Who are we missing?
Christina Lauren.
Oh yeah, Christina Lauren.
I got you.
I was sitting over going, we're missing someone.
I feel like there is another that we've left off, but I'm not sure. But yeah, we've done a lot. And
you know what though? I have to say, like, a big kudos to you, because I really do think it's the way that you structure it. You do a fantastic job of picking backlist titles that authors are going to be thrilled to promote again, right? Usually timed with another release. Like, it's a brilliant, so like, hats off. It's brilliant, and it gives their backlist life as well as promoting their newly outcoming books. And then you're kind of not picking books where you don't know if they're good or not. Like when a brand new book comes out and there's no reviews, you're kind of like, it's a little hit or miss. But you're picking books that based on friends' recommendations are going to be good. Like, you're doing it right. It's smart.
Yeah, one of the things we actually do is look at who already has a book that's out that we know that we're interested in reading, or that we know that people like, that has a book coming out in the next month or two. And so that's how we always pick our author.
It's brilliant.
And we're like, hey, we want to use your book for this readathon and promote your new book.
I will say we've done some books that I would never have been interested in, because originally when it came to contemporary, if it doesn't lean more queer, I don't really read a lot of contemporary. Like I would never have picked up Emily Werbley and Austin Sigma Broca if it wasn't for our readathon. I wouldn't have picked up Chaos is Standing Still by Jessica Brody. And those are some of my favorite books now. So I'm like, I love that we have done some things that are so outside my comfort zone and has introduced me to authors that I'm just like, okay, I love these books. Okay, cool. We're good. I can't wait to interview. We're good. Let's go.
Yeah. It's very smart. You're doing it right.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we kind of love this readathon and all of the people that participate in this readathon, and we work like crazy hard to put it all together. But it's a lot of fun. And
thank you for all the hard work, because I know I felt really bummed out that I wasn't able to participate in the readathon, but there's just, with the writing and everything else, there was no time for it. But I was like, I will be there for that live show.
I will state we do 4 a year, so we got one for every season.
And you know, I know you got stuff going on and you can't hang out with us later this evening, but I am glad that you were able to come and do this live show with us.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And hope things get better.
We're doing good. I'm going to clear up this head cold, and then we're going to be right as rain.
Oh, well, I won't keep you any longer because I know you got things going on. So thank you again so much for joining us. And again, for those that are interested, join Clint and I at 8 o'clock here on my channel for After Hours. Probably drunk, but not quite as drunk as last time live show.
God, no, I can't drink as much as I did last time. I woke up and threw up. I can't. We have people coming over tomorrow at noon. I can't.
I love this idea. I absolutely love this idea. A curse. I forget what a curse.
It's A Curse in Ash. It's my proof copy, so it still has the little banner on it. But this is my book, so totally doable. We could do that.
I mean, I love this idea. I love this idea.
Julie, I know you're working on, is it the sequel to that or just another book?
So no, I'm currently drafting the sequel to that book. It is a duology, and I do have the publishing deal for both of them. So I'm still working on getting this guy out the door. I obviously have to read the proof copy, make sure everything's good in there, and then I can move that through the ringer, through printing and all the rest of it. But I am working on book 2, on the end of it.
Well, good luck with that, and we can't wait for all of it to come to fruition for you. I mean, that's amazing. I know a lot of us booktubers hope to one day be in your same shoes and write a book and have it published, and you know, it's your baby. And so I'm very happy for you.
Thank you.
I definitely think we may have you back in the future as an author for one of our live shows. I think that'd be pretty darn neat.
Happily. Or holler if I can ever come back and do another one of these. If you think that there's a book that you know I love or will enjoy, I was pleased to join you. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Well, we still haven't figured out our next one yet, but as soon as we do, I'll let you know what book we choose, and you can give me the thumbs up or thumbs down.
Sounds like a plan.
And Kelly says, thank you guys for hosting.
You're very welcome.
All right, guys. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a big thumbs up. If you'd like to see more videos like this, click that subscribe button down below. And make sure to go to both Julie's channel, Pages and Pens, and Clint's channel, Reads Readers, and click their subscribe buttons as well. And until next time, remember to always be completely you. Bye.